I'm pretty sure a bird just flew into my back door. I don't see one on the porch, but I heard a big thump. Hi everyone, my name is Brittany, and today I'm going to be doing my mid-year book freakout tag video. I am almost all the way through my GoodReads reading challenge for the year, so I figured this was a really good time for me to update and do a tag that seems to be pretty popular at this point in the year. I do have my iPad in front of me. I am reading everything that I wrote down and all the questions off of my iPad, so I will be looking down every now and then just to make sure that I am on the right track and I've answered the questions in the correct order. The first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far in 2021? I actually have three that really stood out to me. The first one is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I had heard a little bit of mixed reviews about this one, people saying that it's more simplistic and less world-buildy than some of his other writing, but I really enjoyed Warbreaker. I did listen to the graphic audio, so it played sound effects and had different voices for each one of the characters, and I listened to it on Chirp, which is a fairly inexpensive audiobook streaming service. I suppose you could say streaming service. You download the book and it's like Audible, but you only pay for the book that you want. And each month they have different deals. So I found all three parts of Warbreaker and got them for I think less than $10. I finally listened to it and I was very surprised. I really enjoyed the relationship between Ciri and Susebron. And I really enjoyed reading about Lightsong and hearing his perspective on things and watching his character arc throughout the story. I don't want to say too much about him because I feel like that would give away bits and pieces of the plot, and with Warbreaker and it being fairly short, I feel like it was something that everybody should read, especially if you enjoy Sanderson. The second book that is one of my favorites, easily a 5-star book for me this year, was Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy Jones and the Six follows a rock band through their, I believe, first 2 or 3 albums, or only 2 or 3 albums, and it is told like you're reading the transcript of a documentary. I found that to be extremely enjoyable because I could picture the characters in my head as they're responding to these questions that you didn't hear posed, and I really liked it. I enjoyed the characters. There was this dichotomy between all of the relationships and some stress on the relationships that wasn't glossed over. You could see the frustration in some of the characters and the irritation that they had with one another, and I really, really enjoyed it. When I finished Daisy Jones and the Six, I immediately wanted to start it over again. I didn't, but I enjoyed it so much that I could have easily closed the book, opened it back up at the very first page, and read it over again because I loved it so much. And finally, the last book that I really loved so far this year is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Falah. What an incredible book. The Secret Lives of Church Ladies is a compilation of short stories that follows Black women and little parts of their life. So it's like slice of life short stories. This was an incredible read. I started it on a Friday night and I finished it before lunch the next day. It was thoroughly enjoyable. I feel like if I had not heard anything from BookTube about this book, it was not something I would have picked up just based on the cover. It was so enjoyable. I would easily, just like Noelle Gallagher says, I would have easily read a book about each and every one of the individual short stories that made up the chapters. My favorite chapter happened to be Dear Sister, which was written from the perspective of a character named Jackie, who's writing a letter to the sister she has but has never met. And she's writing a letter to tell this sister all about things that happened in her life and the life of her other half-sisters as it relates to the father that they all share. At the end of the chapter, she closes her letter by saying, even though we've never met you, you're still part of the family. It was so heartwarming. It was beautifully told. I laughed out loud so many times in this chapter. I loved this book. It was so good. So good. And I really would read a full novel about any of the characters that were written about. Question number 2 is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far this year? I actually haven't read any sequels so far this year. The next sequel on my list is Before They're Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. That's going to be one of the ones that I tackle this summer, especially since I'm now on summer break and I have more free time to dedicate to reading. So I do have sequels planned. I just haven't read any so far. What are some new releases that you haven't read yet but want to? The first new release that I want to read is Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. I think this story sounds amazing. It's two sisters who happen to be witches with lots of Jamaican influence, and the cover is stunning. I'm so excited about this book. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. June was a very slow reading month for me. I had all grand intentions of finishing my 36 book reading goal by the end of June, and I only made it to 31. So I'm still impressed with the progress that I made. I just didn't get as far as I wanted to. So Witches Steeped in Gold, number one, definitely want to finish that this year. The next one that I want to read is People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. It is a little bit of a, I don't want to say commentary on social media use, but the character, if I remember correctly, is somebody who's social media famous and then is stalked or something like that. And it just sounds really interesting. The cover of the book, it's pink and it has like a phone on it. I think it sounds amazing, especially because I really like these real life thrillers, ones that really could happen, especially in this age where people are constantly putting their personal information out on social media, and this age of TikTok where people want to be TikTok famous. So I think People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd definitely sounds like something I want to get to before the end of the year. The next book that I want to finish before the end of the year, a new release from, I think, May or June. It's a book called Mary Jane by Jessica Blau. I am so excited for this book. I actually started it a few minutes ago before I started recording this video. I'm about 40 pages in, and I love it so far. The main character's voice comes through as I'm reading, and it's like her internal monologue. I love it so far. It's a coming-of-age story of a main character named Mary Jane Dillard. She's taking a job as a nanny over the summer, and the family that she's nannying for, complete opposite of where she lives and how she's grown up. So the growth that I think I'm going to see in Mary Jane is something that I'm very much looking forward to. It's been told so well in just the first 40 pages. I'm hooked, and I hope to finish that one soon. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? The book that stands out to me most is They'll Never Catch Us by Jennifer Goodman. This is the same person who wrote this one. Where'd it go? There it is. They Wish They Were Us. And it sounds really intriguing, especially because I liked the writing style. They were both quick. Well, that one was a quick read. I'm anticipating this one to also be a quick read. And the cover of the book has a shoe with some blood on it, so I think it looks super cool. I'm also looking forward to Well Matched, which is the third book in the Well Met series by Jen DeLuca, and that's also going to be coming out this year, but I don't think that one's going to be out until October, which means I probably won't get to it until next year. The next question is, what is your biggest disappointment so far this year? And I have two. One of them I think is going to be controversial, so I will save that one until the end of this question. The first book that was a disappointment to me is The Lost Apothecary. The cover of the book is stunning. I read the premise and felt like it was going to be more of a story like Aqua Tofana. However, it ended up focusing more on the present day because it is a dual timeline, and the woman in the present day is researching something that happened in the past. And as it coincides with her life, you see her growth and the way that she changes. It just wasn't something that I was in the mood for when I read it. I feel like if I had read it at a different point in my life or at a different time period, maybe later this year, I probably would have enjoyed it more. But when I closed the book, I was left disappointed. Not saying that it's not a great book. I'm sure that if I had went into it with different expectations, I probably would have enjoyed it more. It just wasn't for me. And the second book that is a huge disappointment to me this year is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout. I really don't understand why people love this book. I have no idea. The main character, Penelope, is constantly kept in a veil or a shroud so that people can't see her face. because she is supposed to be the maiden, this untouched and pure being, and she's living in a society where there is a ruling class and then everybody else. During the book, there is this conflict that happens, which sets off a chain of events. And I think the one thing that people really like about this book is how much steaminess is involved. And it was very frustrating for me to read this book because I expected more from the plot, and I was left with very minimal explanation, and more focus was put on how steamy can it get and how weird are the relationships. And it just wasn't for me. I know this book is all over BookTube. I know it's all over Bookstagram. I don't get it. And I want to know, are there more people like me out there who read this and thought, what the hell am I reading? And why do people like it? Because that was my whole experience with the book. Somehow there are 2 more books in this series and people love them. I feel like I just missed the boat. Like, I just was not the target audience for this. The next question is, what was your biggest surprise so far this year? The first one is Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. I thoroughly loved this short story. It was magical. I felt like she put so much into this short story that it could have easily been a full-length novel. I would have read it. It almost felt like a video game, like I was moving through a video game interface as the story was going on. And even if it was, I would play the video game, I would read the book, I would want everything in this universe. I loved it. This was my first N.K. Jemisin novel and, well, short story, and I really enjoyed the writing. It was incredible. So if you haven't read Emergency Skin yet, it is part of the Amazon Forward collection, which you can get for free if you have Prime. The next book that was a surprise to me this year is The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant. In this book, you are following an alternate history timeline of what would happen if the French Revolution failed, and there are these courts that rule the underbelly of society in Paris. Our main character experiences a traumatic event, and that sets her on a path of vengeance. And this book is a YA fantasy. Reading the book knowing it's a YA fantasy, I found it to be incredibly enjoyable. It was beautifully told. The writing was really well done, and I feel like this author is just going to continue doing wonderful things. It was a wonderfully enjoyable book, and I moved through it fairly quickly. The concepts, I did feel a little bit like there was a lot crammed into a small amount of text, a lot of information, not info dumping, but it was a big read. It was taking on a lot in a very small amount of space, and I feel like the author did this successfully because of the language and the writing and the way they structured their prose. Beautiful. I really, really enjoyed The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant, and it was honestly a very big surprise to me. The next question is, who is your favorite new author or new to you author? And it should come at no surprise that my favorite author so far this year is Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read both The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six this year, and both of these books made me laugh, made me cry, made me really feel like I was in the presence of the characters that I was reading about. They were phenomenal. I am currently reading Taylor Jenkins Reid's new book, Malibu Rising. I'm not very far into it. I think I've maybe 5%. So I don't have an opinion on that one yet, but I will in my next wrap up. And of the 2 books of hers that I have read, I really loved them. I'm not a contemporary person, so I haven't read any of her contemporaries, but her historical fiction, excellent. It was excellently done. Taylor Jenkins Reid is my #1 favorite author so far this year. The next question is newest fictional crush. I actually struggled with this one because I don't really feel a crush on a character. If I was inserted into a book universe and fell in love with a character, which one would it be? And if that happened, it would probably be Billy Dunn from Daisy Jones and the Six, just because I love a musician. My first love of my life happened to be a musician, a guitarist, so I feel like Billy Dunn would 100% be my fictional crush or fictional husband if I was transported into a book universe. Not saying that I subscribe to fictional crushes, but I feel like I could easily fall in love with Billy Dunn if I happen to be in the Daisy Jones and the Six universe. The next question is a book that made you cry, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I sobbed. I loved it so much. It was beautiful and heartbreaking. I remember gasping at a certain part in the story. It was incredible. My sister-in-law actually got it for me for my birthday last year, and I didn't read it until this year. I'm so glad that I did because it was incredible. I do think you have to be at the right point in your life to enjoy it. I don't think somebody who's 17 and has not experienced as much of the world is going to get the same thing out of it that I did. Not saying that there's something wrong with that, just saying that different points in your life you're going to get different things out of the book. I loved The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It did make me cry. And I think that just goes to show how wonderful Taylor Jenkins Reid is as an author. The next question is, what is a book that made you happy? And I found my answer to this to be a little bit silly, but the book that made me happy is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. This was my first Christie that I've ever read. It was surprisingly quick to read, but I loved the way she colored her characters, the way she described them, the intricacies that she wove into each part of the text. I found this book to be very enjoyable, even though it is about a murder. It did make me happy. It was a good read. It was an easy read. I didn't feel stressed as I moved through the text, and it was just something that was a lot of fun for me. So I am looking forward to reading other Christies, and I've heard great things about The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, so that's also on my TBR, so hopefully I can get to that soon. The next question says questions, not really a question, it's a statement. It says the most beautiful book that you've gotten this year, and I have to say that even though I did not enjoy this book, The Lost Apothecary is absolutely the most beautiful book and book cover that I have gotten this year. I do also like the book cover of Mary Jane, but The Lost Apothecary is stunning. It has these rich, beautiful jewel tones with gold inlay, like a, what do you call that? Like a frosting, like this gold shimmery frost on top. It's beautiful. It just did not live up to the expectation that I had set when I looked at the cover. So even though the cover is beautiful, I didn't feel like the book and the cover went together. The very last prompt says, books that you need to read by the end of the year. And there are so many. I think I have like 57 of them on this shelf that I've never read. So all of those books are on my list. But I also have a couple written down that I do want to read before the end of the year. The first one that I want to read before the end of the year is Well Played. That is the second book in the Well Met universe. Well Played takes place also at a Renaissance festival, just like Well Met does. It follows a different set of characters. And if I remember correctly, it follows Stacy and somebody that she meets online who is part of the Ren Fair, but it's not the person she thinks it is. So I'm looking forward to reading that. I did want to wait until the end of summer to read it just because that's when the Renaissance Fair happens. I felt like the timeline would line up and it would be really enjoyable. The next book that I want to read before the end of the year is Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. I have not actually gotten this book yet. I had grand intentions of getting it the day it came out, and then COVID numbers in my area were really high, and so I spent a lot of time in March and April just in the house away from the public doing my part. So I am looking forward to getting Rule of Wolves and reading that before the end of the year. Finally, I want to read The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Kornichek before the end of 2021. My sister-in-law read this and said that I would really enjoy it. We have very similar tastes, so that is also on my TBR for the rest of the year. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate that you came along with me today. It's been a little bit of a while since I did such a long tag video. The next video that I have coming out is going to be a tag that I created. It will be out on the 14th, and I look forward to sharing that with you, and I hope that all of you do the tag as well. I hope you have a great day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.